Prof Ed 321, The Teacher and the School Curriculum, Chapter 4, Curriculum Development. Good day everyone, we are Group 3 and we are today's discussant. I am Kenneth Flores together with my members Ms. Shaira May Orogo, Ms. Abigail Katipon, Ms. Darlene Mangiat, Ms. Rica May Cometa, and Mr. John Benedict Lucido. Before we start our discussion, let us have the lesson objectives. In this chapter, the student should be able to: first, analyze different curriculum models. Second, examine the strengths and weaknesses of a curriculum. And third, discuss how these curriculum development models can be applied in the Philippine context. Chapter 4, Curriculum Development. In this chapter, we will discuss the processes for developing curriculum as presented by different scholars in curriculum development through their models. These models have been tried and tested by different curriculum developers across the globe. The models presented are categorized into three: linear, cyclical, and dynamic. The different curriculum development models that will be discussed in this chapter are based on understanding of various scholars of the nature of curriculum as a discipline and as a field of study. Different models are described based on the different views and processes of curriculum development they offer. These models have been recognized and accepted by curriculum scholars as effective and appropriate for developing curriculum at any level. The models are treated as inimitable since each represents various ideas or theories on how to develop a curriculum. Therefore, each model are unique to each other. Linear models. The linear models of curriculum development prescribe a rational step-by-step procedure for curriculum development starting with objectives. The elements in this type of curriculum model follows a sequential pattern. The first linear model that we will discuss will be Tyler's rational model. The proponent of this model, Ralph Tyler, developed the first model of curriculum development. This model was presented in his book, Principles of Curriculum and Instruction, published in 1949. Tyler's rational model follows a sequential pattern starting from objectives to content, learning experiences, and evaluation. He then argued that curriculum development should be ideal and systematic. We can see in this model the three sources of curriculum: the society, students, and subject matter. These sources are needed to be considered in formulating the following elements starting with objectives. It is then followed by selecting learning experiences and organizing learning experiences. Lastly, it is followed by evaluation. Evaluation is done at the last part of this curriculum model as it is used to determine if the curriculum is successful or not. Tyler argued that to develop any curriculum workers should respond to four basic questions. First, what educational purposes should the school seek to attain? Second, what educational experiences are likely to attain these objectives? Third, how can these educational experiences be organized? And lastly, how can we determine whether these purposes are being attained? We can conclude that Tyler's rational model is eclectic as it derives ideas from a broad and diverse range of sources. That concludes this part of the lesson. Thank you for listening.
Now let's move on to the second linear model of curriculum development, which is the Tabas Grassroots model. A follower of Tyler is another curriculum scholar, Hilda Taba. Taba presented her model in her book Curriculum Development, Theory and Practice in 1962. Her model is a modified version of Tyler's model. So, modified meaning she changed it or improved it. Taba argued that curriculum development should follow a consequential and logical process and she suggested for more information input in all phases of curriculum development. Ayan, so Taba believes that there should be a definite and organized order in creating curriculum or developing curriculum, which is why it is said that this uses grassroots approach given the name of the model. To further explain this, let's move on to the next slide. So here are the 7 steps in Tabas model. So the first step is diagnosis of learners' needs. The teacher, who is also the curriculum designer, starts the process by identifying the needs of the students for whom curriculum is to be planned. Taba also suggested that curriculum development could be made successful if there was a diagnosis of needs. This would help curriculum workers in understanding the needs of the learners. It would also help in the selection of the goals and objectives and in the selection of contents. For Taba and for me, this is an essential part of curriculum development kasi from this identification of the students' learning needs, we are able to agree learning goals and set targets throughout the academic year or set objectives for every session. The second step is formulation of objectives. After the teacher has identified the needs of learners that require attention, he or she specifies the objectives by which needs will be fulfilled. Taba pointed out that the nature of the objectives determines what learning is to follow. So why? Why do you think that it determines the learning? Kasi, look, we all do report, right? And whenever we presented the topic, we always prepared the objectives. And that objectives, kung mapapansin nyo, it serves as an assistance in creating the content of our instruction and even in the sequence of how we will present the material. So, yun yung ating second step. So, for the third step, we have the selection of the content. The objectives selected or created suggest the subject matter or content of the curriculum. And not only objectives and contents should match, but also the validity and significance of the chosen content and needs to be determined. For example, the relevance and significance of the content. The content is significant if it is selected and organized to develop learning activities, skills, and attitude. It also develops the three domains of learning, namely the cognitive, affective, and psychomotor skills. A while ago, I mentioned about the alignment of objectives and the content. And di ba nga sa ating objectives, dapat nako-cover yung affective, cognitive, and psychomotor domain. As for the validity, it refers to the authenticity of the subject matter or content you selected. So make sure that the topics are not obsolete. For example, we should not teach typewriting skills to college students. Instead, our content should be about computer and information technology because typewriter is very outdated. It almost doesn't exist. So what we have now are desktops, laptops, and cell phones or palm tops. So that is for the third step. Now let's move on to the fourth step, which is the organization of the Ayan, so tabavai that those involved in curriculum organization have paid attention mostly to the sequence of content but not the sequence of processes. So, a teacher cannot just select content but must organize it in a particular sequence, taking into consideration the maturity of learners, their academic achievements, and their interest. I think there is actually two important aspects when it comes to the organization of content. The sequence of the content and the scope of it. Well, of course, kung mag-create tayo ng content, dapat it includes all the necessary information. Like for example, we can't just teach the type of poetry without teaching its elements. Or hindi pwedeng ang nasa curriculum natin ay ang scope lang ng ituturo natin about poetry is the structure and the author. They must also learn how to analyze the poem, especially if we are teaching high school students. In delivering the topic or the content, we have many options. It could be simple to complex, prerequisite learning, chronology, whole-to-part learning, and increasing abstraction. So, using this model, we can always modify the curriculum content. The fifth step in this model is the selection of learning experiences. So, content must be presented to students and they must be engaged with the content. At this point, teachers should select appropriate instructional methodology that will involve the students with the content. So, in designing the curriculum, we must present as many interesting experiences as possible to the learner. And it must be under the assumption that this will heighten their interest and motivation and result in more meaningful learning. So that is for the fifth step. The sixth is the organization of learning activities. So the learning activities must be organized in a sequence depending both on content sequence and learners' characteristics. The teacher needs to keep in mind the students he or she will be teaching. So we can provide learning activities related to life situation or activities that will let them develop their logical and analytical thinking. But as a future educator, I think it is important to remember that the focus of our learning activities is the demands of the learners, the demands of the society or the community, and the demands globally. If the students are visual learners, we can provide activities that targeted their visual sense. For example, sight words, for PICS kinds of activities, and there's a lot more. And for the last step, that is the evaluation. So the curriculum planner, like the teacher, must determine what objectives have been accomplished. To assess the achievement of learning objectives, evaluation procedures need to be designed. So, dapat may assessment tayo. Hindi lang for the students, but for ourselves also. We can ask feedback from them for improvement. So, that's all for the Tabas Grassroots Rational Model. Now, let's move on to the standard-based curriculum development model. So, who developed this model? Alan Blathorn developed the standards-based curriculum development model. And so from the title itself, standards-based, the focus of this model is on developing standards. This model was intended for developing curriculum standards for any discipline from the basic education to higher education. As shown in the table, Blathorn identified the 3 phases to be followed in this model, prescribing a sequence of curriculum development activities to develop standards. The 3 phases focus on how the standards can be generated or created and further developed. So what are the phases of this model? It starts from phase 1, develop standards. So in this phase, we must develop a comprehensive set of content standards using multiple sources. And the sources can be the learners, the society, or the discipline. Second, refine the comprehensive list by eliminating and combining. So, from an initial set of standards, since we develop a set of standards na, it will undergo an initial refinement. It is possible to eliminate some standards, especially if it is not essential, or it is possible to combine standards into one. Also, in this phase, we must secure input to identify teacher priorities. There are instances kasi in developing standards that we need to consider how the teachers are able to implement the curriculum or how they see a curriculum should be implemented for the next school year or next academic period. Kasi they are the one implementing the curriculum. So they observe, they see, and they have so much to say about the content standards. And lastly, use data to develop final drafts of standards. And data or ideas can be coming from the first 3 steps that we discussed, divided into essential standards and enrichment standards. Basically, the essential standards are required and the enrichment standards are there if we need enrichment of learning for our students. So that is the first phase, which is develop standards. For the second phase, We have development benchmarks. Benchmarks are standards that were set by others, by other schools or scholars or other institutions, which we can adapt or we can pattern our standards. For example, looking for the standards of a very successful school and understanding that to develop our own standards or to further improve our own set of standards. So number one, review decisions about content emphasis. So just like what I said, we can review this decision of other schools and try to reflect on why the schools focus on these standards rather than the other. We can compare it to our decisions as well. Number two, identify standards for continuing development, like standards that will not be benchmark or standards that will be unique for the school or for the institution. For the number three, we can also decide how benchmarks will be identified by task force or teachers. It could be a representative from the school, the head teachers maybe, and or just playing faculty teachers. And lastly, evaluating with criteria provided and secure teacher review. Again, we involve the teachers and revise benchmarks if needed. So the last phase is to develop the final products. Use standards and benchmarks to produce scope and sequence chart. Decide on curriculum guide content, meaning we are already finalizing all the standards and benchmarks that we need from the first two phases. And so we now go to developing the final product or the final set of standards that will be communicated to the teachers who will be implementing the curriculum. And number three, analyze benchmarks into learning objectives. Other things that we need to know about this model. First, Glathorn model is an example of linear and rational curriculum development model. The model is rational and descriptive, emphasizing the development of standards as the first activity in curriculum development. So what does this model recognize? The model recognizes the importance of using multiple sources in developing the curriculum standards. This model also recognizes teachers' input in the development of standards, which I also stated in the previous that it is important because they know how the curriculum was implemented before and they have more knowledge in how curriculum can be properly implemented in the actual classroom setting. These are often neglected in curriculum projects in the Philippines because of the top-down approach to curriculum development and implementation wherein the decisions will be coming from the top post or the administrations and the teachers will only serve as the implementers, but not in this model. And do not forget that it is also emphasized in the Tabas Grassroots model that we need to involve teachers at the beginning of our curriculum development. So those are what we can say the strengths of the model. However, the linear nature of Glathorn model is also one of its weaknesses. So in this model, developing the curriculum standards is a separated activity from the overall curriculum development process, and this makes the model incomplete. The model should be recognizing and developing the curriculum standards as an integral part of the curriculum development process. But this model does not include situational analysis, unlike in other curriculum development model. And while the model specifies the development of standards using multiple sources, it cannot replace the important function of situational analysis in the curriculum development process. Situational analysis kasi, di ba, it clarifies the context in which the curriculum is developed. Pero itong model na to, wala siya na situational analysis. Analyzing the different curriculum sources and influences will lead to the development of curriculum standards that are not just focused on a specific discipline but also consider the important role of the learners and the society in curriculum development. At doon nagkulang yung model na.
Greetings to everyone who's watching this video. This is John Benedict Lucido and I will present to you the Understanding by Design model. This model, also known as the Backward Design model, was built by Grant Wiggins and J. McTighe year 2002 and became a byword in the Philippine educational system because it was used to design the basic education curriculum during the school year 2010-2011 before the K-12 education curriculum was implemented. This model puts emphasis on designing curriculum to engage students in exploring and deepening are prescribed by the government agency on education. This model, if implemented, will improve the school system and its curriculum as well. As you can see in this slide, we can now see that three stages of the understanding by design model are used in order to implement a better educational curriculum. The first stage, identify desired results. This stage seeks to identify what are the possible outcomes that could happen through the use of big ideas and skills. This is where brainstorming of the teachers or the faculty members that contributed to the curriculum take place. The second stage, determine acceptable evidence. The second stage can be done through giving the students a culminating assessment task as a proof that they studied hard for their lessons. This is where paper and pencil tests or even short quiz occur. And the third and final stage, plan learning experiences and instruction. After identifying results and determining the evidence, teachers should start planning for possible learning events that can help the students learn more about a specific topic. Example of these that can serve as learning experiences are the mental health webinars we have today.
Next is systematic design. Robert Diamond originally developed the systematic design model. The model originated in the 1960s and has been revised numerous times, although the basic concept has remained decades later. The model has 5 characteristics: ideal thinking, uses structural diagrams, is dependent on data, foster a team approach, and political sensitivity. This model has two basic phases: first, project selection and design, and second, production, implementation, and evaluation. Like some of the previous models, it follows a linear process of curriculum development. Diamond explained that ideally, some actions must precede others, and certain decisions should not be made until all relevant facts are known. It is imperative that all data must be complete before proceeding to the next. The systematic design model is prescriptive and rational, so it presents a systematic and linear view of curriculum development, and through the use of diagrams, it will help the curriculum workers to visualize the entire curriculum development process. The Phase 1, or Project Selection Design. So in the first phase, the model begins by exploring the feasibility of the project and establishes the needs that are required for its success. It considers field and student knowledge, needs, research, and priorities in order to establish goals and learning outcomes, and ultimately develops an ideal solution for which to focus on. The design of the project also considers factors specific to curriculum, like accreditation, credit requirements, source constraints, existing program efficacy, and courses like goals, scheduling, resources, research grading, and student factors in order to develop clearer path to implementation. Next is the phase 2, or production, implementation, and evaluation for each unit. So in the second phase, the model contains determine objectives, select instructional formats, evaluate and select existing materials, design evaluation instruments and procedures, produce and field test new and evaluate materials, coordinate logistics for implementation, and implement, evaluate, and revise the project. In this phase, it allows curriculum workers to design for the production and implementation of the curriculum and on the importance of the evaluation of instructional materials to ensure the smooth implementation of the curriculum. As we can see in the figure, it involves a series of tasks which, if carefully followed, may result in a relevant and effective curriculum. So it was said that if this model was applied here in our country, it would probably be difficult because of the lack of research culture in our education institutions. So because in this model, having a research culture among faculty members can improve the way higher education curricula are planned. Next is Moray Print Model for Curriculum Development. Moray Print published his model in book Curriculum Development and Design in 1988. His model prescribes a sequential and logical approach to curriculum development to provide a useful and easy to understand process in developing curriculum. It revolves around three phases. First phase is the organization, where the nature of curriculum workers are recognized since they are involved in the curriculum development process. This includes what they represent, their conception of curriculum and the forces and foundations influencing their thinking. So for the second phase or development, it pertains to developing curriculum following a cyclical process, beginning with the situational analysis, the aims, goals, and objectives, followed by content learning activities, and ends in instructional evaluation, before continuing with situational analysis again. And for the last phase, which is the application, the actual application starts with the implementation of the curriculum, the monitoring of and feedback of the curriculum, and the provision of feedback data to the presage group. So this is the Murray print model. And let's have the following strengths of his model. So it is sequential and logical approach curriculum development. So a while ago, that it is an easy to understand process which has three phases. Starts with organization, followed by development, and then to application. So next, it recognizes the nature of involved curriculum workers. And then it embraces the principles of cyclical and dynamic models. And then inclusion of instructional evaluation, monitoring, and feedback system in the process. And last, it can be used in any level of curriculum development. So now for the weaknesses of Murray Print's model. So although it describes the process of curriculum development, on a macro level, it is unclear where the philosophy of the institution and philosophy of the curriculum will come into play. And then weak link between curriculum presage and situational analysis. So curriculum presage pertains to activities and forces that influence curriculum developers in their curriculum decision-making tasks. And then last is lack of contextualization of curriculum.
Good day to each and every one of you. I am Rika May V. Kameta, and I am the discussant for cyclical models of curriculum development. So, why do you think is the reason why they are cyclical? Well, it is cyclical because it is continuous. It has a beginning but does not have an end. Because the last step becomes the basis of the first step. So, one important aspect of cyclical curriculum development models is situational analysis. Situational analysis is a process of examining factors that exist in the environment or society where the curriculum is going to be implemented. It is according to Situate 2010. So, the different things that we analyze around the situation are the learners, the society, the demand, even economics and environmental conditions. We also have to consider our different curriculum sources and curriculum influences like media, alumni, um, organization, or even church. First, it is prescribed a cyclical or continuous process of curriculum development. Cyclical models usually start with situational analysis that serves as the basis for all succeeding processes. Meaning of a structural analysis may be exactly done at the beginning, but in reality, situational analysis can be actually be done at any stage of cyclical models. But it is very important that for cyclical models, we need to conduct situational analysis before we proceed to the other steps. This is similar to what Hilda Taba have concluded as an additional input in the curriculum development process. So now, we're going to discuss the first cyclical curriculum development model, which is Nicole's curriculum development model. So who are the developers of this model? They are Aubrey Nichols and Howard Nichols in 1978. According to them, they believe that the curriculum development is a continuous process. They prescribe 5 logical and interdependent spaces that are in a continuous curriculum development process. Again, these 5 logical and interdependent stages will start with the situational analysis, in which curriculum decisions are made, followed by the selection of objectives and other succeeding phases. So now, what are the steps and where does it start? So it starts with situational analysis, followed by selection of objective. Next is selection and organization of content. And next we have selection and organization of methods and evaluation. If we try to look at it, we will acknowledge that the steps are very similar with the steps of Ralph Tyler and Hilda Taba, only that it is not in a linear arrangement, but in a circular and cyclical arrangement. The model is highly prescriptive and dynamic. It is dynamic because changes can happen at any point or at any step of the model. Now, what benefits can this model get from situational analysis? So, the inclusion of situational analysis as a part of the model is a valuable principle in curriculum development. It enables the curriculum workers to understand better the context in which the curriculum is developed. By starting with situational analysis, curriculum workers will be able to collect data and the needed information from various curriculum sources and influences that are prerequisites in formulating curriculum goals and objectives. Now, if we apply situational analysis in college settings, faculty members need to do this before planning the syllabi and curriculum plans, or in basic education and elementary and secondary, junior high school or senior high school. If you're going to conduct a situational analysis, it may be considered as a long and task. However, it is very beneficial to the curriculum because situational analysis make it possible for the curriculum to be more relevant and responsive to the needs of the students or to the school. So, what do you think are the things that this model recognizes? The model recognizes the influence and importance of contributing disciplines such as philosophy, psychology, and sociology in developing the curriculum. If you look at these three, these are similar to philosophical foundations, psychological foundations, and further logical foundations of the curriculum development. And the importance of these three disciplines in developing the curriculum is also recognized in the model of Ralph Tyler. Now, the model has the potential to be used in any situational setting. So, what are the other benefits that we can get from using this model? The cyclical nature of the model enables curriculum workers in making necessary changes and adjustments in the total curriculum. This attribute will be helpful for teachers, administrators, and educational boards to address curricular issues and propose innovation and changes. Again, this is because the model advocates a circular development activity that involves continuous improvement. So, meaning in the 5 steps of Nicole's model, we can actually make necessary changes and um, adjustment based on the actual situation that we have analyzed. So, for example, we have done already the situational analysis at the beginning, but when we are in the process of selecting our objectives, there are instances or there are things that may happen which may influence how we select our objectives. So those things are for the model's strengths. So we also have to look for the weakness of this model. What weakness does this model has for the Philippine setting? There is a little weakness found in this model. The possible problem that may occur is that many curriculum workers are used to develop curriculum following a linear model like in the Philippines. In our country, curriculums developed follows a top-down approach where many circular decisions are made in the national level. The goals and the contents of the curriculum are set by the state. In the context of higher education, there is a tendency for teachers not to follow this model because of Tanda's job of conducting situational analysis before developing any syllabus or curriculum plan. And that's it for this model. Again, I am Rika May V. Kameta, and thank you for listening.
Hello everybody, I am Shara May Orogo and I will be the one to discuss the Wheeler's Curriculum Development Model and the Contextual Filters Model of Course Planning. Now, let's discuss first the Wheeler's Curriculum Development Model. The proponent of this model is D.K. Wheeler. D.K. Wheeler was an educator at the University of Western Australia in 1967. He developed and extended the ideas by the work. Wheeler's definition of curriculum, the planned experiences offered to the learner under the guidance of the school. He developed and extended the ideas by the work, influenced by the work of Tyler, Tabas, and Bloom. The Wheeler's Curriculum Development Model is a cyclical process in which element of the curriculum is related and interdependent. Wheeler model of curriculum development is a type of model that indicates curriculum development as a continuous cycle. According to this model, curriculum development should be responsive to changes. Moreover, this model targets situational evaluation. This is because the context within which the curriculum decisions are taken is considered important. This practice can help make the most effective decisions. And sinasabi din na ang Wheeler's curriculum model is one phase and it cannot proceed to the next phase unless the preceding phase is done. Meaning, sa model na ito, hindi pwede na mag-jump agad sa susunod na phase kung ang unang phase ay hindi pa fully developed. Also, in this model, Wheeler emphasized the importance of starting from the development of aims, goals, and objectives. So ano-ano nga ba yung phases na meron ang model na to? This model includes 5 interconnected phases. First is the aims, goals, and objectives. Second is the learning experiences. Third, the selection of content. Fourth, organization and integration of learning experiences and content. And the fifth phase is the evaluation. Now, let's examine each phases or parts of Wheeler's curriculum development model. The model starts with aims, goals, and objectives. It is the first step of model in which aims covers all the experiences provided in the curriculum. Goals are tied to specific subjects or group of content within curriculum, while objectives describe more specific outcomes as a result of lesson or instructions delivered at a classroom. The next is the learning experiences. The second step of model is about learning experiences. It is an activity which the learner engages in which the results in his or her behavior. It is very important that we consider the learning experiences of the learners because in that way, mas madedevelop ang skills nila. Say for example, in learning experiences, we can have practical assessments so that mape-perform ng mga bata yung natutunan nila through books. And the third phase is the selection of content. The selection of content is what teacher teaches. It must be related to validity, significance, utility, interest, and learnability. Here, ito na yung buong content na itinuturo ni teacher. So, dito sa phase na ito, dapat meron ng concrete na lessons and dapat valid and align sa learning abilities ng learners dahil sila ang number one beneficiary ng content na itinuturo ni teacher. And the fourth phase is the organization and integration of learning experiences and content. So the simplest explanation for this step is that you will now apply or integrate both the learning experience and the content. Now, the last phase is evaluation. It is very important that evaluation should have clear objective and aligned assessment strategies designed to test how well students have achieved the learning outcomes. Through evaluation, mas ma-assess natin kung may natutunan ba talaga ang mga bata. An effective example of this is the paper and pencil test. So once this cycle is complete, it starts again from the first step and goes onward, continually improving the curriculum. The next model that we will discuss is what we called the Contextual Filters model of course planning. This model was developed by Stark, Lothar, Bentley Ryan, Martens, Gethon, Wren, and Shaw in 1990 as part of their study conducted at the University of Michigan National Center for Research to improve post-secondary teaching and learning. The Contextual Filters model presents a cyclical view of curriculum development. So after making decisions, the planners can check with the content considerations and contextual filters. It describes the reality of how college faculty members design their courses. Hence, it is very much applicable for designing higher education courses. The model is based on a research conducted by the proponents on how faculty members in several higher education institutions in the United States plan their curriculum. Several curriculum influences such as faculty background and educational beliefs are recognized in the model. The influence and the special role of faculty members in curriculum planning and development are recognized as a main factor in curriculum development in higher education. So this model is very teacher-centered. Given the influence of academic freedom, faculty members may plan the curriculum based on their own convenience. The model can be improved by putting students as part of the content influences. And students are viewed as a significant source of curriculum. So as I've said earlier, ang learners ang siyang beneficiary ng content ng curriculum. So that's why it is very important that we consider this model. And considering the fact that most college faculty members do not have pedagogical training, the model failed to elaborate how contents and process are arranged. This could have been very useful for faculty members, especially for neophyte instructors who do not have background knowledge on education. The title Contextual Filters Model was chosen to convey that teachers' disciplinary views and related assumptions are stable antecedents to course planning, largely independent of context. In the process of course planning, however, these assumptions are filtered through and modestly affected by various influences in the college context. The contextual filters model of course planning is divided into three parts: the content, context, and form. Now let's discuss first the content influences. Content influences encompasses faculty members' background and associated disciplinary and educational beliefs. So aside from educational beliefs, pinopoint out din nito yung mga purposes and other disciplines or other key factors in course planning. The next or the second part is the contextual influences. It refers to the influences outside of the instructor's immediate control that causes adjustments in the course plan, such as students' characteristics of instructional resources. Dito sa contextual influences, minomodify niya yung content na kung saan yung characteristic ng students are the most prominent or the most important. And then the third part is the form. Form includes the processes that are followed when designing courses. Form includes the final decisions that teachers rather make based on content and context. So, sa form, dito na pumapasok yung content and context. So, ito na yung equal ng dalawa. So, doon na siya pumapasok sa form. Now, let's examine the contextual filters model of course planning. Now, let's take a look at the diagram. So, as I've said, they are divided into three parts: the content, contextual, and the form. So, under the content, we have faculty background and characteristics, faculty views of their academic field, and the purposes of education, such as effective thinking, concept learning, personal development, value clarification, social change, learn great ideas, and vocational development. And under the contextual filters are the students' characteristics, students' goals, external influences, program goals, college goals, and other key factors. While in the form or the course decisions, we have select subject matter, select learning activities, arrange subject matter, and establish goals and objectives. Both the content and form, inire-require sila na magkaroon ng feedback. So I hope that you learned a lot from me. That will be all for my report. Again, I am Sharami Orogo. Thank you so much for listening.
Dynamic models of curriculum development. The dynamic models describe how curriculum workers develop curricula in various educational contexts. The dynamic curriculum development models are usually used in school-based settings. It is characterized by constant change, activity, or progress. Let us talk about the first dynamic model, Walker's model. Its proponent, Decker Walker, developed a model for curriculum development and first published it in 1971. He contended that curriculum developers do not follow the prescriptive approach of the rational linear sequence of curriculum elements when they develop curricula. In his model, Walker was particularly interested in how curriculum workers actually do their tasks in curriculum development. Because of this, he was able to identify three phases which he termed platform, deliberation, and design. We can see here the illustration of Walker's model. The first part, we have the platform phase. Walker suggested that curriculum workers bring with them their individual beliefs, knowledge, and values. They have their own ideas about how to do their tasks and they are prepared to discuss and argue about them. This phase is similar to the idea of Print 1993 of a curriculum persage. Next part is the deliberation phase. It involves identifying which facts are needed for means and ends, generating alternatives and considering the consequences of these alternatives. This phase is also used in weighing alternative costs and consequences and choosing the best alternative for the curriculum task they are about to do. In the last phase, which is design, it involves planning, decision making, and actual development of the curriculum. Now, let's talk about the advantages of this model. Walker's model is a dynamic and descriptive model of curriculum development. It is stated at the beginning that Walker's model focuses on how curriculum workers actually do their tasks. Hence, it reflects the realities of how curriculum workers plan and develop a curriculum. It recognizes the role and influence of curriculum workers in any curriculum development task as well. In addition, it avoids the obsession of starting with objectives, which completely contradicts the linear type of curriculum models. However, this model also exhibits its own disadvantages. First, the model being dynamic can be confusing to other curriculum workers who are not aware of the necessary processes of curriculum development. Another weakness of this model is its strong tendency of the curriculum development to be stuck in the phase 2, which is the deliberation phase. Weighing alternative costs and consequences is a trial and error task, hence it requires a lot of time and effort. Therefore, we can conclude that the deliberation phase is time consuming, hence the tendency of workers being stuck on working on it. That concludes this part of the lesson. Thank you for listening.
So letter B, Skillbeck's curriculum development model. So in 1976, Skillbeck came up with a model for developing a school-based curriculum in Australia. His model presents a dynamic view of curriculum development. So as a dynamic model, as an opposite of linear, curriculum is not sequenced. It is flexible and interactive with each other. When using this model, curriculum workers may start from any phase. However, as shown in the figure below, each phase is interrelated and follows a systematic sequence. There are 5 required steps in this model, namely situational analysis, goal formation, program building, interpretation and implementation, and monitoring feedback, assessment, and reconstruction. Skillbeck's model includes a situational analysis that involves gathering data from the school, society, and the learners. The result of the situational analysis provides strong basis for making curricular decisions for all the succeeding phases of curriculum development. So basically, we can say that it is a process of examining factors that exist on the environment where curriculum will be implemented. This involves careful observation and analysis of the situation. Skillbeck's model describes his phase, both external and internal. This first phase. So, dun sa external, kasama dito yung culture, parents' expectation, at yung mga support system. While sa internal, it includes students' abilities and needs, also the teacher's skills and knowledge. For the goal formulation, there is an assigned decision-making role to teachers or the senior staffs and principals in the development of objectives for the school-based curriculum. So, ito na yung creation of learning goals or learning objectives. While in program building, it comprises selection of subject matter for learning and the sequencing of teaching learning episodes. Kasama din dito yung pagde-deploy sa staffs or sa teachers at yung supplementary or yung pagsusupplement ng learning materials. While in the interpretation and implementation, it is where practical problems are anticipated and hopefully will be resolved. Kasi na-interpret na, so there are big picture na to visualize. Tapos, i-implement na natin siya with the thought of success. And lastly, monitoring feedback, assessment, and reconstruction or the evaluation. So here, the role of teachers in evaluation phase are perceived to ensure curriculum reconstruction. So for me, this is one of the realistic ways to handle the curriculum development kasi the process is dynamic and the developers are free to be more creative and and it also has the evaluation which ensures reconstruction. However, since it is dynamic in nature, it may appear confusing. Kasi nga pag sinabing dynamic, interrelated siya. So, walang specific na start or walang particular na sequence. Okay, now let's move on to the next topic. Another dynamic model of curriculum development is Eisner's artistic approach to curriculum development. So, Elliot W. Eisner was a famous curriculum scholar. In 1979, he published the book, The Educational Imagination, where he presented his idea on how curriculum development should be done. Eisner believed that there is a need to develop a new theory that recognizes the artistry of teaching that is useful in helping teachers develop those arts. In his book, Eisner outlined how this artistic approach can also be used in curriculum development. Now let's try to dig in further onto this model. This model has 7 parts, namely goals and their priorities, content of curriculum, types of learning opportunities, organization of learning opportunities, organization of content areas, mode of presentation and mode of response, and types of evaluation procedure. So in the first part, we have the goals and their priorities. Here, there is a need to consider less well-defined objectives as well as explicit ones, and the need for deliberation in talking through priorities. So in selecting the goals and objectives of the curriculum, Eisner stressed an artful process of arriving at a consensus about curricular priorities by involving the participants. Engaging the participants is similar to Walker's idea of platform or yung kay Schwab's idea of deliberation. So, writing effective learning goals is a necessary skill in curriculum development. It is the foundation for instructional alignment whereby the learning objectives, assessment tools, and instructional methods mutually support the desired learning outcome. So, there must be a deliberation too, wherein we have to assess the learning goals which are really essential and needed, its consequences, kasama din yon, and if it really meets the priorities. So in the second part, which is content of curriculum, we have options to consider in selecting curriculum and caveats about the null curriculum. In selecting the content, Eisner considered the 3 sources of curriculum, which are individual, society, and subject matter as identified by Tyler. So accordingly, curriculum workers have to study and consider the sources in order to develop the curriculum content. In selecting this content, we have to consider some options like its relatedness to the goals and objectives, or are we going to present it in a chronological list, or would it be a simple to complex kind of sequence? And also, caveats about the null curriculum. So, we have to be cautious. Baka mamaya may naisama na pala tayo na hindi naman dapat ituro. Yung null curriculum na tinatawag censored. So, we have to be reminded of that matter. So, for the third part, we have the types of learning opportunities wherein we have to emphasize the transforming goal and content into learning events that will be of significance to students. So, on selecting learning opportunities, Eisner strongly favored providing students with a wide variety of learning opportunities. Accordingly, educational imagination must transform goal and contents into a high-quality experiences for students. The learning experiences must give students the opportunity to practice the desired behavior. If the objective is to develop problem-solving skills, the students should have ample opportunity to solve problems. Additionally, dapat masatisfy yung mga students sa learning experiences and opportunities nila para ma-maintain yung interest nila sa lesson. Yung learning opportunities dapat maumpisahan in a way na mako-continue yung prior knowledge nila. Fitted ba yung, dapat i-consider din natin kung fitted ba yung learning experiences na nakahanda para sa abilities nila. Like, kakayanin ba nila yon at dapat madaming options ng experiences para mas effective yung learning. We can also try group learning, one-to-one learning, peer-to-peer learning, or classroom learning. Pwede rin yung simulation. So for this fourth part, which is organization of learning opportunity, in this part, we have to emphasize the nonlinear approach in order to encourage diverse student outcomes. Eisner also emphasized providing a variety of learning opportunities to different types of students using varied resources and activities. But it is not only about providing. There must also an organization of learning opportunities. Yung nonlinear approach to learning, it was emphasized to ensure that the students can shape their learning through self-organization and self-discovery and creation. So there will be a personalized learning experience that accommodates different abilities or accommodates initial knowledge base and learning styles that fits a classroom with diverse learners. Dapat meron tayong individualized learning. Sa organization of content areas, there must be an emphasis on cross-curricular organization of content. So Eisner contended that curriculum content should be organized and integrated in different ways. So yung cross-curricular instruction, it is an instructional strategy that offers a way for teachers to plan lessons that incorporate more than one disciplinary area. So this allows the students to broaden their lens of understanding and apply skills and strategies they learn in lesson to deepen their overall understanding and make authentic real world connections. Like for example, as we travel to the grocery store, we might use a map to get there, and that is geography. Or need to assess our needs and wants as we navigate the aisles, and that is economics. 'Di ba? Pagka sinusuri na natin yung bibilhin natin. And calculate the amount of money we need to give the cashier. That is mathematics. So all of these academic disciplines come into play together in one real-world experience. So using this example, we can already see the first of many benefits of cross-curricular instruction. Sixth, mode of presentation and mode of response. Use of a number of modes of communication to widen educational opportunities for students. So Eisner suggested using different strategies and methods to engage the students in meaningful learning. Sometimes learners are good listeners, but they often forget. In that case, we can try communicating with the use of visual aids para sa mga visual learners. We can use pictures, written posters, and practical demonstrations to improve communication. And we should also use them as much as possible kung ang ating tinuturoan ay visual learners. Or kaya naman, pwedeng written communication by the means of written materials or handouts. So teacher may use handouts for students to refer to during a lessons. And students will definitely use them in their self-study time. So, yun naman kapag written communication. While some prefer to listen and take notes of what the teacher discusses. So, iba't iba yung students natin. Kaya dapat meron tayong nakahandang different modes of communication. Types of evaluation procedure. Use of a comprehensive range of procedures at different stages of the process of curriculum development. Lastly, for Eisner, evaluation is not the final step curriculum development, but rather it is something that pervades the entire curriculum development process, meaning it can be integrated in every parts. We can evaluate every parts or every steps. Evaluation previously confined to the learning outcomes of the learner, but now And after it became central role of interest to quality assurance in educational institution, the concept of the evaluation it expand duties to include evaluating the teaching process as a whole, yung study plans, the course content, learning resources, or the teaching methods. So sa lahat ng part, it is essential to evaluate. Eisner's model is an open-ended process or a form of a dynamic model. It is descriptive in offering a general approach that can be followed by curriculum workers. Yet, the model is also prescriptive in offering suggestions about what should happen when developing a curriculum. So, being dynamic, it is not only open-ended but descriptive and prescriptive at the same time. The Eisner's model recognizes the influence of various curriculum workers in developing a curriculum. So, as we discussed earlier, the model emphasizes the importance of having well-defined goals and objectives in curriculum. It recognizes the varied activities that teachers do in the school to attain goals of the curriculum. The model may be effective in the context of developing and designing courses for higher education. So, the influence of academic freedom and the changing nature of the disciplines in higher education require a curriculum model that is less prescriptive but logical enough to embrace the artistic or creative way in which faculty members develop their courses. And this model fits that concept. And since the processes are not procedural, curriculum workers can always modify and improve their curricula to address certain problems and needs. The model calls for more relevant and responsive ways of selecting and organizing contents and learning experience to respond to the diverse needs of students. And I think that it is one of its strengths kasi teachers are the one who usually see and know what is going on and what is happening in actual classroom settings, and that knowledge is helpful in modifying the curriculum.
And now, we are going to tackle Pavilion's model for developing curriculum. The author developed this model as one of the major outputs of his doctoral dissertation in the University of the Philippines, Diliman. It is intended to help curriculum that is relevant and appropriate to the Philippine context, according to the creator of this model, which is Pavilion on the year 2011. Curriculum sources are general factors that influence or affect curriculum development and decision making in the macro level. So, we will discuss later what are all the sources, the influences, and the levels of curriculum development, which is in line with Pavilion's model for developing curriculum. In the next slide, we will discuss some of the elements that are present in this model, which are not just actually made by Pavilion himself, but based on some works of some researchers. Let's take a look. Two levels of curriculum development, according to Posner, year 1995. In creating curriculum, there are two levels. The first one is the macro level. It includes general/overall process of curriculum development, while the micro level focuses on specific phases/contexts. To explain even lighter, the macro level of curriculum development focuses on the major processes that is happening in creating a curriculum, and the micro level focuses on the smaller ideas inside the curriculum. That is how the curriculum development is split into two levels. We will now move to the curriculum sources based from Ralph Tyler's model, year 1949. This one is present in the model made by Pavilion. The first one, which is the curriculum sources, the learners. Considered sources because of all the possible variables that are significant data for developing curriculum. Needs, interests, thinking, learning styles, and etc. are all part of the variables mentioned. That's why learners can be considered as curriculum sources. The second from the curriculum sources category is the society. Knowledge about the society provides better understanding of the context in which the curriculum will be implemented. The society is considered as curriculum sources because they have knowledge that can be applied in curriculum development. The third and final curriculum sources is discipline. Understanding discipline is also essential in curriculum development. It can provide data for making decisions as to what contents should be included in the curriculum and how to organize the contents of the curriculum. Mainly, all these three sources are essential in creating a more improved curriculum because we all know that teachers, students, and everyone in the school or the university desires for a better educational system. That's why they create a new curriculum which can benefit all of them and even improve the education quality. And now, we have the curriculum influences based from Stark and Latuca's model, year 1997. So earlier we had the curriculum sources. Now, we will gonna proceed to the influences on why the curriculum became a curriculum. Starting off with the external influences. External influences are social factors that directly influence curriculum decision making. These factors are society, market demand, government, disciplinary associations, and alumni. When we hear the word external, it means outside something. And when we say external school influences, it means influences outside the school. External influences in this curriculum are those that support from outside the school, which are the government and everything. The second curriculum influence are the internal influences. Those related to the school like faculty members, students, disciplines, and the program mission. Earlier, we discussed the external influences which are outside the school, and now internal influences, factors inside the school that influence the creation of a new curriculum. For example, students like to hang out online. That's why there are certain live programs which are held online. That is the idea of internal influences. For the last influence, we have organizational influences. School factors but are more concerned with the governance of the program and support system. Considered as organizational influences are the school resources, leadership, governance, and program relationship. It includes the student leaders who are not just leading the school but also leaders outside their school. In some cases, there are also schools that has government sponsored organizations wherein this school is near to the specific government agency that helps them. That's why organizational influences are one of the most influential things in creating a better curriculum so that the teachers and the students might benefit from this. And for the second half of this model, we're having the next discussant to present to us the process for developing curriculum under Pavilions model.
So, analysis of different curriculum development models. So, this will be the last part of the chapter 4. So, this will be a summarization of what we've talked about earlier from linear model up to dynamic models of curriculum development. This figure that I provided is a summary of the result of the analysis of different curriculum development models in relation to the two dimensions suggested by Print 1993. The curriculum models are based on curriculum researchers and are based on certain theories of curriculum, and each model is unique depending on the curriculum theory advocated by the prominents, and it is the role of the curriculum developers to select a model based on their context. So now let's start analyzing different curriculum model, and this will serve as our recap. So under linear model, this includes standards-based curriculum, development model, understanding by design, systematic design model, and Print's curriculum development model, which provide a direct and time-efficient approach to curriculum Development. These models simplify the process of curriculum development such that curriculum workers will find it easy to follow. The linear models are highly prescriptive and rational. They state precisely where to start in the curriculum development process. Usually, they start with the situational analysis or selecting objectives. The cyclical model of Nichols and the contextual filter model of course planning model presents an interrelated procedure for developing curriculum. These models are prescriptive by starting with situational analysis, yet they are also dynamic. So as you can see in the graph that I presented earlier, that um, it was in the middle of prescriptive and the dynamic or interaction. It is in the second quadrant. These models are applicable to school-based curriculum development. So let's now move on to the dynamic models of Isner, Walker, and Pavillion's model are less rigid in application and they can be used in school-based curriculum development. These two models reflect the reality of how institution and teachers develop curricula. Sneer's model is prescriptive, yet it is also descriptive, while Walker's uh, it is a model which is highly dynamic and prescriptive. So now let's go back to the figure that we had earlier. And since the reporters have already discussed the meaning of prescriptive, dynamic, descriptive, rational, let us now just summarize everything else. So Tyler's model, Tabas Grassroots model, understanding by design model, systematic design model, Prince model are both prescriptive and rational, while contextual filters model, Nichols model, Pavillion's model are both prescriptive and at the same time dynamic. And next one is Walker's model. It is also dynamic, yet it is descriptive. On the other hand, standards-based model, Wheeler's model, Sneer model are both rational and descriptive. So, by simply looking at this figure, you will be able to identify which models are highly prescriptive, rational, or if it is highly dynamic, or if it is descriptive. Each model of curriculum development is based on a curriculum theory that are developed by various proponents. The models presented are reflections of what various authors and scholars believe about the nature of curriculum and the process of curriculum development. Each has its own rightful claims, so we can always learn some principles from these models. First, when developing a model for curriculum development, there are always the need for a clear and logical process. Second is curriculum sources and other variables that are influential in developing a curriculum should be specified. The third one is that models should reflect how educators plan and develop curriculum in any levels. Fourth one is the models should be based on a curriculum theory. And on the other hand, each process in a model should specify areas which curriculum decisions are made. And lastly, each model should reflect a major phases of curriculum development, such as planning, design, implementation, and evaluation. It is very important that each model should be applicable in various contexts. So that's the end of our discussion about Chapter 4. We wish that you've learned something from us. And if you have questions, clarifications, or suggestions, just comment it down in our comment section or kindly send us a direct message. Again, thank you for listening.